Greetings and welcome to Chapter 3 of Creativity Forever 24. My name is Scott Walker. I am the Executive Director of the Canadian Artists Network, and once again, it is my pleasure to be your host for today. This week, we've been welcoming artists from coast to coast to coast and pretty much everywhere where artists create. And let's take a second to acknowledge that we all live, work, travel, and create on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. We acknowledge this as part of our covenant with all Indigenous nations to share, respect, and protect the land in the spirit of peace and friendship, and to honor the future generations of all our nations. Today, we're going to be talking about mixing the generations, creativity, and mentoring. Anyway, we're going to talk about mentoring today. We're also going to talk about the importance of connecting with younger artists because, they are the future, after all. We'll talk about that until the top of the hour, and then we'll begin our breakout sessions to discuss today's topic and the takeaways. And those will all involve, of course, creativity, mentoring, and connecting. So we'll meet today's panelists now. The first one is one of the first women music directors in radio, probably programmed Gwen McCrae's Rocking Chair back in the day.
Did.
She's the owner and editor-in-chief of Cashbox Canada, the founder and co-owner of Cashbox Radio, where I have a regular show, and the founder and managing partner of Record World International. Please welcome Sandy Graham.
Hello. Hello. Yes, it's honestly, I know you've already said this, but we could not have done that video without the support. And that's what young independent artists are facing, as well as midlife artists like JC are facing. So I just want to acknowledge that I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Sandy. We're going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes. Let's meet our other panelists. Producer, director, writer, actor, educator, talk about a portfolio career, which we were talking about on Wednesday. He works on both stage and screen. Welcome, Edward Healy. And his mentee is an award-winning, multi-talented actor, creative producer, voice artist, writer, and director, who worked with Ed Healy to develop his career as a producer and filmmaker. Welcome, Omata Udalor. And unfortunately, our third mentor, Jenny Lauzon, was not able to join us today. She's opening her play 1939 at the Belfry Theatre in Victoria, and one of the actors came down with COVID. So there's a lot of scrambling going on there. So we wish her very well. However, her mentee is here, and I know they've been talking recently, an actor, writer, creator, facilitator of expressive journaling workshops, another portfolio career, and a winner of the Cale Chernin Award in Theater Development. Her play Seven Pieces was developed with the support of Jenny Lauzon and the Canadian Artists Network. Welcome, Jen Forgy. Let us talk. We'll hopefully get JC in here shortly, but I want to start by talking with our two mentees and hopefully our third one shortly. Jen, what did having Jenny Lauzon as a mentor mean to the development of Seven Pieces?
Oh, it meant a lot. One of the Jenny's an Indigenous artist, and I am and have been, and part of this story is my own journey of my Métis ancestry, and really stepping into that. How do I do that? How do I write about this? It's not the main part of the play, but it is part of the story. And I went into working with Jenny, trusting her lived experience, her work as an Indigenous artist and woman, her work as an artist, period. And she was able to support me in stepping into my voice. I had gone through a workshop years before that. My voice in the play had been overpowered a little bit, and I felt that I lost some of my confidence, and I lost my voice with the piece. And one of the key things Janny did as my mentor was continue to encourage me to step into my voice. She kind of helped me heal that fracture that happened, and just really advocating and encouraging me to listen to the spirit of my piece and let that spirit speak, which it did and it has done. And yeah, working with Janny was an incredibly powerful experience. She was respectful. We had a mutual respect. I knew her as an artist, and the trust that I had in her to not overpower my work, but to actually help me open to my work and speak from my voice. She was so respectful in that process. I could go on. Do you want me to go on?
We'll come back to that because I know you have more to share, but how's Seven Pieces doing? What's
Oh,
sort of development are we in?
It's so I am an artist in residence with Theatre Passe Muraille. They have been incredibly helpful. We just am supportive. I used 2 grants that I received last year from the City of Toronto and Ontario Recommender, or OAC.
Webinar. Phew.
Hey, JC.
JC, welcome.
Jeez.
Hold on for a second. We're right in the middle of Jen talking about her piece, and then I'm going to introduce you properly.
I'm sorry.
Hello.
Quite all right.
We just did a workshop in May with, for our first time having a director, was Jessica Carmichael. And we had a full cast for this workshop, and many incredible things were discovered. And so now where we're going with the piece is, or where I'm going in the writing, is we're bringing in, I'm bringing into the work accessibility for blind people through the text that I'm creating, especially and significantly in the directions, the stage directions. And so I'm also now working with the dramaturg, a blind dramaturg, Jessica Watkin, through Theatre Passe Muraille. So it's just elevated so much. And yeah, I can't even, and we have more news, but I'm not able to speak to the news yet.
Understood. But I'm so glad to hear things are coming along so well. It's such a long gestation project for any theater piece. So
what's interesting about that comment, Scott, is that when I went into, I started, Seven Pieces started as a seed with the Native Earth Performing Arts and Nimikie program. I was one of the creators in that 2-year program, and Marjorie Chan was my mentor, my dramaturg, and remains my dramaturg. And I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to have this done and written, and we're going to get it on stage like within 2 years. But this is where Janny came in, and it was like, oh, the spirit of this play, because it's quite a deep and layered piece, and just really learning to respect the process. So it's almost ready. So it is a longer process and not 2 years.
Good. Okay, we'll talk more in just a second. Let's welcome our third mentee. We just saw some of her work with Rockin' Chair. Welcome, JC. Great to have you with us. I want to find out what having Sandy Graham as a mentor meant to the development of Rockin' Chair and your career.
Well, it meant pretty much everything. Before I met Sandy, I had started building a social media platform. I really started from nothing. I started from a few friends on Facebook, and I wasn't really all that familiar with Facebook. This is probably in about 2016, 2017. I had retired from my corporate job, and I'd always been a vocalist back in the day, and I decided to sort of, get back into it. And I started like sharing karaoke things, just vocals of me singing on Facebook. And I was approached by a friend of mine who said, do you want to make some music? Do you want to make a CD? And I said, sure. That's how it started. So from there, building my social media platform, you just keep connecting with music people, radio curators, music curators on Spotify, keep connecting. And how I met Sandy was I just saw her on Facebook one day. I saw her profile, and she looked very interesting to me. So I connected with her, and right away we started talking, and so we ended up. It ended up that Sandy mentored me, and at the time, we were talking about developing a new song. So when you're a vocalist, when you're a recording, songwriter, recording artist, you're always trying to find new ways to sort of get in there because it's difficult to be heard. So we thought this time let's do a cover instead of one of my original songs. Let's find something from back in the day that people can relate to, even the older people and the younger people, because we'll do a new updated version. And so that's how it started. So I started talking with Sandy about that, and she had a connection with Dance Plant Records. So that's how it all came about. And we were talking back and forth, what are we going to do? Production, and let's make a video. That'll be cool. Let's try that. And I had never made a video before. It was really, really exciting. So yeah, that's how I met Sandy, and now we're friends.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And Amada, what about working with Ed? How did that help you and your career?
Oh, wow. Working with Ed has been absolutely amazing. It's been really short in terms of the program. My history with Caesar Can Arts has been, 4 years now, Scott? Started in 2020, and I approached Scott for mentorship in acting initially, and I was paired with Nigel Bennett. Unfortunately, due to some health reasons, the program was cut short. And while I was in that program, I had gone into some programs for producing, which really piqued my interest. And I reapproached Scott again and was like, well, my acting program didn't really come to a nice conclusion, but I was wondering if I could get another opportunity to explore my producing side. And I got paired with Ed, who has been absolutely amazing and really opened my eyes to different aspects of film production that I never really explored before or even knew they existed. He's just been great and very warm and giving and very absolutely open about all the aspects and nitty-gritties that you encounter in filmmaking, which is something that's really hard to come by, especially in producing. When you're looking for a mentor, all the producers of repute are busy. They don't have time, as much as willing as they may be to take you on as a mentee. The time to actually provide that mentorship is very hard. And so Ed has been very gracious in providing his time and just being attentive. And most importantly, he has a knack for spurring you on. A lot of times we get into these projects or assignments and stuff like that, and real life happens and it's easy to fall behind and lag, but Ed's always on point. He's always there to give me an extra nudge, and I really appreciate Ed for that. And even after the program, we're still friends, we're still in touch. We're working together on a couple of projects at the moment, and it's been absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. In film, I like to say it's an environment that is built up of personal relationships. And so finding those relationships that you can rely on and trust is very important. And I like to say Ed is someone I've come to trust very, very much. I really appreciate Ed. Thanks.
Thanks, Amada. Let's hear from the mentors now. I want to find out from both of you why you feel mentoring is important. Sandy, I'm going to start with you.
Well, it's interesting because I get approached often to mentor artists, and what I find very what you were just saying about it, that it is a personal relationship. It is, you either gel or you don't gel. And it's been really beneficial to me. She's my poster child, JC. She's the one that I went, wow, this is the one. And to see, it's very rewarding to see someone that gave up her career to, be with her family, and she was traveling Vegas, she was doing all of those big shows, and gave that up, and then came back to it and was welcomed so warmly. So the achievement side is, as a mentor, I'm sure you feel this way, Ed, that you're hoping it's going to work. You're hoping what you can say you can do for them. And then when it does happen, you go, wow, that's amazing. So I think it's the same gratification. And, you know, I was never an artist, but I was a professional dancer and choreographer. My last big one was choreographing Sky Dome. And so I know that feeling of they didn't like us, or how do we get paid, or no one wants to help us. So it was different as a dancer, obviously, and I worked in film for Atlantis as a choreographer. So to take an artist that, you know, artists are like, I don't want to say your children, but you want to nurture them. So what I found working with JC was, we joke about we didn't know who was mentoring who, you know, because we were learning together. And because I'm in the industry, I do get current music, at least 500 submissions a day. So every time that golden one shows up, you think, oh my goodness. And JC pursued me, and I said, I really would think you should try the program. And you know, if she got me, great. If she didn't, she should still try the program. And that worked out. And the biggest thing I've found about mentoring and is that you have to have artists that listen, and you have to listen to them, because you know they're not fragile, but they're sensitive. And
Well,
so
we're fragile.
well, I was trying to be nice. Well, you know, we joke that it's my day, it's Tuesday, I'm neurotic today, call me Friday. But you know, I think that's the biggest thing, Scott, is that the rewarding part is I no longer perform, but I get to see my artist perform, and people say, oh, she's amazing. And you go, oh, I get that same feeling as when I was a performer. It's the same gratification. It's an interesting feeling. And it's like when they start to make it, it's kind of like letting your children walk to school alone. You're going, oh goodness, they're growing. And one thing what Janet mentioned about Dance Plant is that is distribution on Sony, The Orchard. So she's now on a label that, you know, is impossible in these current times to have that happen. So she's had great support, and she's got a killer voice that helps, you know. But she does. So when you're saying that, for me, it feels like I get the gratification that I had as an artist. I get the gratification as a creative art person, because you know we joke, Janet and I would, JC and I joke about the fact that if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster, because there's no guarantees in the creative arts. And when something happens as a mentor, you feel so good because you made it happen with the artist.
Thank you for that, Sandy. And I've been seeing heart emojis floating up. So what you just said has been resonating with a lot of folks who are with us today. Ed, how about you? The importance of mentoring and the whole experience. Oh, Ed, we are not hearing you for some reason. You are not muted, but we are not hearing you. No, still not hearing you. The gremlins have not finished with us today, clearly. Ed, can you maybe, here's what I'm going to suggest, that you log out and rejoin us. And hopefully the connection will work, and hopefully somebody's backstage and can help you get in this time. It's the only thing I can suggest. Oh, wait a minute.
Can
Wait.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With no headphones.
Okay.
Technology.
Because the volume on the computer doesn't match the headphones. I was saying I was trying to figure out how to send those emojis up, you know? Anyway, mentoring and producing, I find fascinating. Because when people think of producing, they think of financing and distribution. Those are the two primary sectors that okay, I want a producer because I need the money and I need to get it out there, right, to generate a revenue. And that's true. However, producing is tied into the content of what the program, the film, the documentary, the series is about, because that will determine the quality of the program that will get funded. Because if there's no quality, there's no interest in funding. But then also leads to the streams of funding and distribution. So I came up with my own funding formula, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago. And it's based on the premise that a film is only a film when it's on the big screen. Then it goes to television, then it goes to cable. And back in the day, it would go to disc, VHS or DVD, right? And you could fund and educational distribution within that. So you can start your program by tackling the funding stream from any one of those sectors. So from educational and partnering with community organizations, depending on what your content is, right? Through to television, feature, whatever, because then the content gets repurposed and the order of telecast, broadcast, film, distribution is secondary. So you suit those avenues of what we think of as end revenue from distribution as primary source of funding. I hope that made some sense right now.
It
Yeah.
did indeed. Thank you
Um,
for that, Ed.
And you look international. And the fundamental principle is good content sells. And art to me is a business and should be treated as a business. It's interesting. I've never in over, I guess, about 15 million in production over the years from my own production company Forward, which I closed down when I turned 60. I never used government money. Now I've had government contracts, which has been interesting, but I've never had telefilm money or Arts Council or any of the traditional streams. And I'm all for them. It's just that everybody knows they get really jammed up. There's so many applicants, never enough money, right? And often the decisions are political. They're not based on merit. So that's what I try to bring to the table. But again, the relationship between the so-called business side of things and the creative, because I went from being an actor in the 80s to writing with CBC on my own series. That's how the writing began. And then because of the bullshit within regular television with CBC and Global, I said, screw it, and I opened my own production company. And I learned to direct as an actor by paying attention on set, as we all do. And working with good people, like Gail Harvey directed one of my first major projects, right? She did the shooting, I did the post. So, and you keep building. And when it comes to, I guess I got to tie this back into mentoring. Working with Omada, for example, the passion, the freshness of perspective on two projects that we're working on, because it began with one and it's moved on to a documentary. So we're working on both of them, moving them forward, has been really informative and educational for me as an individual. So I continue to grow in adapting my technical knowledge, business knowledge, but also broadening my intellectual and spiritual knowledge from what Omada brings to the table and what he's created. And it's just been fascinating. It's just, I love it. I mean, the name of my production company was Youth View Communications, and I always specialized in youth issues. And one of my earlier projects in the early 90s was creating and writing the curriculum and directing the first television series made by high school students for broadcast. And it was quite successful. And then moved on from there with my production company. And so I've always mentored. It's just a part of staying connected And like I have 4 sons. The oldest is 35, youngest is 29. And oftentimes the relationship is more beneficial between young people and me than between me and my sons. And I have a great relationship with my sons, right? But I think you know what I mean, right? So so I'm looking forward to the continued adventure with Omada on getting these 2 programs up and running. So for example, instead of looking at a broadcast series, we're looking at a web series. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that wasn't possible.
Right.
Right. And a web series can generate revenue. And if a network really likes your web series, then they can refinance and take it to broadcast. So it becomes, the series becomes like a pilot for network in prime time, and again, it's like getting on a Sony label, right? It's difficult, but it's possible. The other thing is going to a streaming platform. You don't have the same limitations on sponsorship that you do on network broadcast. So it's quite the adventure by making sure that the artistic content is not compromised by any type of sponsorship. So, which is easily done because the creator and the director, like in Omada in this case, is the one who's going to make sure that those lines aren't crossed, because you end up sacrificing content.
I want to pick up, thank you, Ed. I want to pick up on something you said. Well, you used the Y word, youth, and I want to use that as a springboard to talking about intergenerational exchange and relationships. I'm really sorry that Johnny Lauzon couldn't be with us today, because she has some interesting things to say about working with younger theater artists. And Jen, I know you've been talking to Johnny about this. Can you express what Jenny's concerns are about working with younger artists in theater?
I can do my best. So I know that in Jenny's experience, and I am gonna quote her, so that they're her words, with her permission. One of the biggest challenges is developing relationships with youth, between elder artists and young artists. This is an old problem. It's been around for a long time. But what we're seeing in the theater world is a kind of tear down culture, like a cancel culture, around the way that art is created. And her feeling is that we need to change this. And she has expressed, and I know this also from my work with her, she does not necessarily believe decolonizing the process is what needs to happen, though she in completely and absolutely, but and this is where I want to quote her words. I totally understand that a fundamental change in the dogma and the paradigm of creation needs to shift. But instead of tearing things down, I like to consider filling it up with what it is we'd like to see and experience instead. And that is a different mindset, which I really appreciate. It gives us, she said, that it gives us an opportunity to infuse our process with what it is we'd like to bring to the table without completely tearing down the foundation of what is useful. So in this conversation of relationships with youth, and I'm in agreement, it's like, how do we look at the values that still matter and not just like wipe them all out, look at what needs to change, but also pull in what is of value, what can help us in moving forward and developing art. And I'm speaking right now to theater, but of course this does apply to mentorship. So it's relationships with youth, with elder. In my words, it's respecting that there is value and knowledge and lived experience that came before. And those people have something to bring. Not always everybody, but there is value there. And I'd like to see more of those conversations. I'm a midlife artist, so I'm edging towards being an elder artist. I
Happens
got
to everybody.
I got a bit of time still. But I really love the openness of a relationship in conversation to see what, and also the youth, like youth have so much to bring to us. It's not just what we have to bring to them or what elder artists have to bring to them. There's a reciprocity, there's a mutualness in that open development of relationship, I think is needed.
I've heard from other directors who are elders in theater the same story that we've been hearing from Johnny through you, and thank you for that, Jen. That, for example, young actors will agree to do a play and then say, I don't want to say that line. I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't feel comfortable with that. Well, the question could be, why did you take the contract? But clearly they're being supported in that, and it's detrimental to the piece sometimes. So that's something that has to be worked out. We're obviously not going to work it out here, but it is something that has to be worked out. I'm wondering whether what's happening in theater is happening in other art forms as well, whether there is this wanting to blow it up and start all over again. So I'd be interested. Amada, you are, as Jen said, you're not an emerging artist either, but you are closer to the emerging artists than most of us here, certainly those of us in the mentoring side. What's your experience?
I totally have to agree. The cancel culture is really eroding on the artistic premise of most pieces. I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, there was a call for the show, the American version of The Office, to be taken off air because a lot of people found it offensive in many ways. And they forget that the premise of the whole show was based on the ludicrous absurdity of the comedy that was used to explore various topics. Now, at the time the project was created, that was normal. Now it's not politically accepted, but that does not take away from the fact that it was made in a different time. And that being said, exists right now. So you find a lot of artists and filmmakers treading with caution when creating pieces. As Ed had mentioned, it comes down to the financing as well. You try to please the politics of the financiers for your project. And that is really eroding into a lot of creativity that is being created right now. Projects try to please the audience as opposed to send a message.
Yeah.
And we find that a lot in many, many projects today, especially the emerging and I'd say mid-level projects. There's a lot of stuff that you'd come across and you instinctively know that there are better ways to tell the story, but they're just trying to play to the audience. I remember a session I had with Harrison, the founder of Actors Foundry in Vancouver, and he said that he doesn't watch, especially when it comes to TV shows, he doesn't watch a show past its third season, because by the third season, any show, and I've come to realize that he was telling the truth, from the third season, the premise of the show deviates from the characters into the real world. They start talking about current issues. They bring issues that happened in last week's news into play. And you find they just deviate from the original premise of the show and now talk about common factors that are happening on today just to keep the show going and to keep the audience glued. It becomes, in lack of better terms, a show based off of the news. So it's,
Tabloid.
yes, exactly. So again, back to the premise of the cancel culture, everyone is treading lightly because everyone wants to essentially make some money off the projects. And the only way to do that now would be to play to the field of the audience, as opposed to creating content that impacts the audience, changes the audience, creates conversations around the audience, right? So it's something we see, we encounter. And yes, conversations need to be had, of course, not today, but those are conversations we can learn a lot from our elder statesmen in the artistic space. And there's a lot of information that can be passed down. There's a lot of ways to tell the same stories without really offending anyone, but still passing those messages across.
Thanks a million.
Just to add a point to
Yeah.
what Omada said. So the first project that I was engaged with Omada was Pastor G, which is a series on this pastor and the adventures he encounters per episode. My rule of thumb, going back to the day, the rule of thumb is it takes 7 years from concept to final production on a project. That's the general rule of thumb. You can go faster, but a lot of times it goes slower. So the average is about 7 years. The good shows, their content is still current and still resonates with an audience 7 years later because of the creative content that it originated from. It's not adapted as you're talking about after season 3. That's why, for example, I believe in your product, fidelity to content, right? So I agree with you, but in getting any project, theatrical, music off the ground, it's the fidelity to the content, the story and the characters that makes it sustainable.
Thank you, Ed. Omada, you said that conversations need to be had. We're not going to have those today. I think maybe we should have those today, or at least start the conversation. JC, I wanted something Omada said. I heard you go yes to. So I'm guessing you've got something to say on this topic.
I mean, I see the same thing. There's growing up through all these decades, you know, you have, when you're talking about television, for instance, you know, you have All in the Family, you have Seinfeld. I mean, there's many of these shows that certain episodes, they can't show them anymore because they're not politically correct, but that's what made them so funny. And you have to take it in the spirit in which it was meant. Archie Bunker was he's a lunatic. The whole show was based on the fact that he was a racist and how ridiculous he looked being a racist, right? So that's why I was nodding my head. I agree with you on there. But I think with you know, anything in life, even when you have your own kids, when you're talking about, you know, when kids talk to their parents about things, they just think they know more than their parents. I mean, that's just the way it is. I think what we need to do is try and make these kids listen and understand that they're going to be in our exact spot at some point, and try and help them navigate that. Because I know that I was never sort of navigated through that process. All of a sudden it hit me like a brick wall. I'm like, wow, I didn't think this was going to happen. You know, all of a sudden I'm older and it's very hard to deal with. And I think, Sandy, you can probably agree with me. We talk about this. So I think the concept of talking to youngsters, getting them to understand, like, for instance, I can relate this to my singing. When I sing a song, you know, I have my lows, I have my highs, I have my mids, and I just don't hit them. I have to learn how to navigate through all of them right? So we have to learn, and that can be with anything. We have to learn how to navigate through our life in a sort of a spiritual and graceful way, so that we're not hit all of a sudden with this shock, because then we go into panic mode. So when we're talking, you know, for instance, music, when we're talking music, again, it's difficult. Some of the music that I do, people might call old school or elevator music sometimes. But if you work with these kids, like I have a grandson and he's a musician too, but he likes to listen. He likes to listen to my stuff. That's because we sat down and we've talked about it. And you know, we've talked about the fact that when you're a musician, your changes or your desires and what you want to perform and the kind of music that you love, that will change throughout the years, and that will help you to grow and how to accept those changes as you go through, because they're not always easy to navigate. And I think that's something that we should focus more on, because then I think we'd have better relationships with the younger people.
Okay, so how do we build that trust? How do we develop those relationships? Sandy, JC said you've been talking about this.
Well, the biggest thing is listen to them. You know, we're always saying back in the day, this is how we did it. And, you know, and it's like listening to your grandparents. You go, yeah. You know, and funny you say that, Ed. I have a 33-year-old and a 35-year-old, both boys. And the 33-year-old is in radio. And it's interesting to watch his journey. He's also a musician. For 10 years, he wouldn't charge for his product when he was 16, 17. That's because mom paid for the manufacturing. And so now he's suddenly a businessman, and I'm getting smarter as he's getting older. It's very interesting to watch. But, you know, before he wouldn't had nothing to do with grants. He didn't want to know about OAC. He didn't want to know about Canada Council. Now he comes over and says, do you have an hour to go over my grant application? So I had to listen to what he had to say, because, you know, Scott, as a performer, and I'm talking on the music side, and I'm sure it goes as an actor as well. You don't ever think you're going to get older. I mean, you know, I remember one day just walking by the mirror and going, who's the person in the mirror? Like, what'd you have? Get out of my house. You know, like, it's a very weird thing.
I still do that.
I know. You know, I keep thinking I have Epstein-Barr virus, but I'm just getting older. And so the interesting thing, because I work in Europe a lot, in Europe, they treat me like gold, these young artists. They can't wait to talk to me. Where in Canada, they think they know it all, and that's fine, but they have valid points because the industries have changed. You know, we're talking music, but back in the day, you know, I owned nightclubs, I owned the Horseshoe. You know, bands could work there 5 nights a week and get paid. Now they're working for the door, and they're lucky to get gas to go home. So the climate has changed, and we have to listen to what they have to say to come up with a new scenario to how to move forward. I learn from younger artists every single day, but most of them, you have to teach a moral compass and say, this is how you have to do things. There is no fast track. And I think that's interesting, but I think the way to bridge it is to listen to what they have to say too. We can't get all teachery on them, you know, and tell them we know everything, because we don't. The industry changes every single day. I mean, 300 artists were dropped from Universal in the last 2 months. You know, one of them was, unfortunately, Liam Payne. So Liam Payne took it hard, obviously, but wasn't all that was wrong. But so we got to listen to what their concerns are, what their needs are. And JC will tell you this, my first thing I do with a mentee is list your dreams, tell me what you want to achieve, and we'll put it into a plan and have a strategy. Because as you said, Ed, in my world, it's the music business, and the second word is bigger. It's a business, just like any other business. And so I always say to artists, the younger artists, you can commit to this, and it can either be a hobby or a lifestyle.
Mhm.
And when you're in creative arts, it's a lifestyle. We're nomads. I mean, you know, you talk about Gail, Ed, whenever she finishes a production, she goes, well, I'm unemployed again, you know, so we're all
exactly.
nomads in this business. And so I think the biggest thing, Scott, is let's hear their side too. What are their fears? You know, what do they need? And luckily, my children have taught me a lot on the way of that. My youngest is a guitarist and my eldest is a bagpiper. So it was a very noisy house growing up, and a drummer, which is noise beyond belief. But I think we got to listen to them too.
Yeah.
And listen to what they have to say. And we can't get, in my opinion, we can't get ensconced in the, oh, well, they don't want to know. It's how we approach them, and instead of, I always say to an artist, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for you. You're in the driver's seat. Without music,
Mhm.
I don't have a career. I don't have a career. So, and I think that's important to listen to what they have to say and bridge that gap, because they're facing totally different challenges than we did. Totally different. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a great deal of sense. And again, the
And-
emojis were rising as you were talking.
Absolutely, right across the board. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, an interesting premise, working with younger artists, they're coming to us with their creative.
Mhm.
So that's the beginning point of listening to their point of view.
Right.
So you've got it in the lyrics, you've got it in musical composition, you've got it in the play, in the script, you got it in the documentary, you've got it in the series, whatever it may be, right? It's
Mhm.
their point of view. That's the beginning point. So I'm really shocked to hear what I'm hearing about the younger generation wanting to tear down, because I have not experienced that. I've got this group of friends. They formed their own theater company. I can't remember the name, but it's representing almost the whole BIPOC community. So mental health, physically disabled, transgendered, they're all members. And they're very successful people, but they've come together to form this, and they're very busy producing. And I met them working as an actor for them like 10, 12 years ago on stage. And I was the ingenue because I hadn't been on stage in 30 years. So I just out of respect, I listened to what they had to say. I had to depend on it. Right. But they've always, right across the board, they've been evolutionary in their approach rather than tear down. They want to evolve what's gone on from a directorial point of view, from a script point of view. Hari Thomas, who grew up in Stratford, his mom is a big star at Stratford. And, he's a graduate of the National Theatre School. He was my first director out of this group. And his partner, we worked together on a play. And I'm just stunned by this wanting to tear down. Tanisha Tate's a friend, worked with her. And she's been artistic director and director of her theater company, and never has she articulated an experience of this wanting to tear down. I understand everybody wants to change, and that's okay, because that's what's expected of young people. But I'm just, I'm surprised, and I really feel for you when you encounter that type of resistance.
I just want to say
I
to
was
that,
just going to turn it over to you, Jen.
to
'cause I
that
know you had
point, it's
something
not
to
an
add.
absolute and it's not all. It's just,
No, yeah,
it
yeah.
is definitely part of the pendulum shift and so just to be clear, that what I shared and what was said from Janny, what she offered in her absence, is not an absolute. It's just one of the challenges that is happening. And if we're talking about the conversation of mentoring between elder artists and youth artists, that does need to be a part of the conversation, because how do we have open relationships if we're encountering that kind of cancel culture? So it's not going to be solved today, but it's definitely something to open the door and address. And if it hasn't been experienced, I think, fantastic. I've had incredibly positive experiences through the different workshops with my play, you know, and I've been a part of, as a midlife artist, I've been a part of working with youth artists through Volcano. And it's just been incredible. But I've also experienced the other side of it. So it's not all or nothing, but it's part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I hear of it. I've just never directly experienced it. I've worked with negative people, you know, like as Scott said, you know, why'd you take the contract, right? You know, but yeah, Jen, how large is your cast in your play?
Oh, 8.
Good for you.
There's 8 people, 8 actors, movers. Yeah.
I'm really pleased to hear that.
Thank you.
You know, the Canadian formula is 2 or 4, right?
Yeah, no, I'm completely going against all the rules. And this is why Janny was such a great mentor, because my play is very edgy. It's not neat and tidy. It's deep. The topic is provocative. It's going to, as Omata so beautifully said, you know, impact the audience, open conversations for the audience, have them feel something. I'm all over here nodding, yes, yes, serving the art. And that's one of the things Janny did for me as my mentor, was to respect the voice of the piece and the writer. I was the mentee, while also bringing in her lived work, professional, personal experience to advocate for the art and keep letting the edginess and the discomfort be there as part of the art. It's yeah. So that's all.
Well said. Well said.
No, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jen. And I'm looking
Thank you.
forward to seeing 7 pieces
Oh,
Yes.
when it
Yes.
hits the
Coming.
stage.
When does it go up? Have you got an opening date yet?
we have the season, but I can't announce it yet. And
Okay.
Right,
and
you
we
said
have a
that.
director, but I can't announce any more than that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's finally yeah, it's gonna
Very
be.
exciting.
It
Very
is.
exciting. Okay. Well, I will share with the world when you share with me, when you're able to do that. And we're getting lots of heart emojis as well. So this is great. We've pretty much run out of time. I am going to task the breakouts to talk about how we reach out, how we engage younger artists, because they are the future and they can be huge allies in our fight against ageism. And that was a topic we didn't even get a chance to talk about, but it's sure out there. We'll definitely do that at a different time. Any final thoughts from any of you before we go to the breakouts?
I just want to say, as far as being a mentee, the one thing that I find imperative and so valuable is that now I'm not alone. I'm not alone in the process. Before I met Sandy, I was alone, like completely and utterly alone in this. And you don't really know if what you're doing is right. You don't even know if you should be doing it. You don't know how other people feel about it. Some days you're high and other days you're way at the bottom, and there's nobody to talk to about that.
Yeah.
And now I have somebody who's like my right arm that's always there to be able to connect with. And it's, I can't even believe that I went through what I went through without her, actually. So that's why I'm extremely grateful. And that's really one of the most important things about having someone that you can go to, having a mentee.
Thank you, Janet.
Well, as the great Stephen Sondheim said, no one is alone. It's just we have to be reminded at times that we
Yes.
are not alone. And that's one of the things we try to do at the Canadian Artists Network. Any other final thoughts before we head off? I thank you all.
Yeah, 2 things.
Yes.
When I taught producing at the Wingush Film Institute that Shirley Chichu set up, all of my students were were filmmakers, and they were all young, and they were all Aboriginal from Northern Ontario. And I went in because I've worked in the Aboriginal community, and they've been partners on projects, and since a long time ago. I was prepared as the old white, straight, blue-eyed, blonde white guy to have, and not just because I was older, right? You know, I was in my 60s when I did this, early 60s. Some resistance, and I didn't have any. It was all about, and they would challenge me, and strongly, but it was all based on the work. Even when we got into the social issues, because all of their scripts were based on the social issues coming out of the community, their community.
Mhm.
And we got into history and everything else like that. So to me, that was really encouraging as an individual to have that type of working relationship, because it was very intense. I taught them 5 days a week, 10 hours a day for a solid month. And then they would go on to do directing and editing in month sections. So it was very intense, and it was great. And we're still in touch, you know, it just, and they move forward. But that type of acceptance, because they were young, Aboriginal, and they accepted me who I was, because there was nothing to check off. I'm able-bodied and I'm straight on top of that, right? You know, so that's a serious joke, but you know. Anyway, I just wanted to give that as an example. The question I have: do we get a smoke break?
You can have one right now because we're going to go into the breakouts. You can't smoke in the breakout rooms, but you could join late if you really want to.
Okay, so I can dip out for a minute,
You can.
and then I will be assigned to a breakout.
You will.
Okay, great.
Okay.
See you in a
Turn
minute.
your camera off before you go.
I don't want to do that because I don't know if I can turn it back on.
I can relate to
Always
that.
something.
Oh, I know what I can do. I can just. Can't do that either. Okay,
No.
video.
Not
At
taking
any
any
rate, okay,
chances.
we'll
Okay, see you in a minute. There we go.
there you go. Okay, all
Okay.
good. It's all good, and thank you all so very much. This has been a wonderful conversation. We're going to continue it in the breakouts. I thank Jen Forgy, Sandy Graham, Edward Healy, Omata Udalor, J.C. Saul, and Jenny Lozon in absentia. So there's lots to talk about, so let's do that. We're going to start the breakouts. They'll last for about 40 minutes, and then we will all come back. Each breakout will have a facilitator, and then we will all come back and find out what the other groups had to say. And here are a few things to maybe talk about. What is your experience engaging with younger artists? How do we strengthen the relationship? Just a couple of things to get you thinking and to discuss. And I look forward to finding out what we all have to say. So enjoy your breakout. Welcome back, everybody. Good to see our panelists. I'm glad you were able to stay. And we're going to find out what everybody talked about in their breakouts. I can start with mine. I posed a question, and this is something that I really want to do. A short video series, for YouTube and maybe even more so TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, of artists of our generation saying to the camera, what would I tell my younger self, as a way of engaging without appearing to preach. And somebody said, yeah, and what would I tell my older self? Which could also be an interesting thing, just as an archival, to look back 10 years later and say, did I really say that? So that's one thing we talked about. We also talked about encouraging connections, and we're going to I mean, this is kind of an overall theme, encouraging connections. We want to talk about and with younger artists. And I think through our online salons, we are going to invite a lot of younger artists to join us to talk about the intergenerational exchange. So that's something we're going to do. Also, going into schools would be one way to reach to younger artists. Now, I realize that has all kinds of, there are legalistic things you have to do to get there, but it's something to investigate. And one of the participants in my breakout said that it's not necessarily being being a teacher, it's being a catalyst. And that's a very, very important distinction. So thanks to my group, let's invite Leah Murray to join us to talk about her breakout and find out what Leah's group talked about today.
Thank you, Scott. We had interesting discussion in our group around the fact that the means to engage are opportunities that are sometimes fewer and further between as we age, and that we actually need to be reaching out more, and that we need to find or develop more opportunities to reach out. We noted that community and unpaid work sometimes offers a lot more opportunity for cross-generational discussion and accesses, and cross-discipline attempts to reach out also make it a little bit easier, because there's a give and take there that actually facilitates better communication. When we were talking about how we would go about doing that effectively, we asked if we thought we needed an elder arena or an elder program for youngsters and elders to connect in. And so I think we're sort of headed in the same direction as Scott's group was with that. And we also decided that we as elders need to get comfortable in a learning role, so that it's a give and take, not just a give from one side to the other. And we noted that social media comfort levels really help. That a large part of our opportunities do come through social media these days, and that being comfortable with a social media platform can really help get that opportunity in there. And it can give us the opportunity to reach out as well in a lot greater ways. And getting comfortable being the elder in a learning role, because we're going to learn things from the younger people as much as they're going to learn from us in this thing. This is a two-way street, and somebody noted that it's an evolution, not a revolution. You don't throw out everything, but you pick and choose the things that you're going to keep and do.
Very good points. Thank you, Leah Murray. We'll invite Nikita Carter to talk about her group. Hello, Nikita.
Hi, Scott. Hi, how are you, everyone? We had a really interesting group in that it was very small. I don't know if all the groups were small. It was just three or four of us, actually. And so there was lots of excited storytelling and sharing. And it's funny, we came to a lot of the same conclusions, and I think that all the groups have in that kind of a way. One of the things that came up from all of us as we spoke and introduced ourselves was this whole thing about asking questions, being inquisitive, being willing to learn. And, you know, out of those questions, you start to find out what your skill sets are, how they compare, and how you can share what skill sets are transferable, as opposed to thinking of them as modeling. and mentoring, but this kind of affirmation and sharing that can go on. Somebody said mentorship is not passing along information, but support. And I think that Leah was kind of saying that too, this whole idea of learning and sharing. And we all have, a lifetime of experience, and some with more and some with less if we're working with younger people. But I think that there's an interest in realizing that we're, all human beings, and we all have things to bring to the table and different experiences. And even as a young person, in their teens has a decade and more of experience, and some good, some bad. And so we all have things to learn, because we all have had blessings, have all had woundings. And how do we support and learn and heal and grow together, this interconnectedness piece? And how do we think about differently as we age? Are we thinking differently? And asking those kind of questions about younger people born in the 20th century. How do you ask a 20-year-old how they think differently about aging? How do they feel differently than in this last decade as they've grown and learned? You see young people in their early teens who are experienced on social media like we as elders wish that we had. They understand it's a language they speak fluently, and we're halting in it. So we all have different degrees of comfort with things that we know and things that we don't. Yeah, and remembering what we didn't know when we were young is also something we can pass along.
No kidding.
So yeah, so I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Nikita. That's great.
Thank you.
We'll invite Tracy Hoyt to join us. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, how are you, Scott?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. We had a very lively group. Quite a few of us were from Ontario. We had one artist from Alberta and one from BC, everyone ranging from writers to playwrights, dancers, choreographers, designers, actors, playwrights. We had quite a group, and so inspiring. The first question, how do we engage with younger artists? A few things that came up: writing groups, working in multi-generational settings when we're teaching or even when we're participating in something, sharing through arts education, giving back came up in the conversation a few times. Listening. Sorry, I'm skipping a thing here. Oh yeah, listening is how we engage. We engage by listening. I'm just thinking about the last comment, like honestly, hiring people is a great way to engage. Hiring your kids to do your website, hiring younger people to coach you. I just wanted to share a personal thing of bartering. You can share your skills with someone else. If you don't have a lot of money in the budget, you can hire a friend or a younger artist to share skills. You do an exchange. So that's something I wanted to throw in. When we talked about how to strengthen the relationships with younger artists, listening came in very strongly. Giving people space to let things sink in. Asking them questions, which has already been said. Offering what we didn't get in our own training. I think it's the reason I started coaching. Share the things that I wish I could have been taught myself, and do it in a way that's really healthy and fun and not obnoxious, hopefully. Giving prompts, being open to a different point of view and letting that change you as the coach, as the mentor. Several people mentioned engaging with younger people in their personal lives, grandchildren, engaging in their creative projects, listening to their stories and sharing your own stories, looking at photographs with them, teaching them stories from your family. This was a wonderful comment: giving historical context without being obnoxious. I said, when I coach, I often name my peers, the mentors that taught me things. I like to name them. I like people to know that that's not mine. I stole that from Alan Arkin. That's not from me. I learned it from him. Total name drop. But
good one too.
It's important to acknowledge our mentors. It's important to let people know that we're students right to the end. I borrowed from one of the moderators from the other day who wisely asked for a word from everyone, a takeaway at the end of our discussion. And we got some wonderful words: connecting, sharing, listening, learning, opening, engaging, and finally, be honest. Be honest moment to moment with the younger people you're working with or talking with or listening to. Be honest in your reactions and in what you're sharing. So it was, I'm pumped, Scott. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm supercharged right now. It was very inspiring and very exciting to, and I can't express how connecting this whole week has been as someone who's been writing a play for many, many months by myself. It's been so nice to talk to other creators this way. So thank you for everyone who's helped make this happen and for all the wonderful guests we've had this week.
Oh, thank you for that, Tracy. Really appreciate it. And that's a very important aspect of why we do this conference, is to help us all connect. Claudia Moore is going to join us, and we'll find out what she had to say. Thank you, Tracy. I loved your line, and I know a lot of other people did too, about give a historical context without being obnoxious. Sometimes hard to do at the same time, but what the heck, we try. Hello, Claudia. Welcome.
Hello, Scott. Yeah, what a fabulous 3 days this has been. I'm really grateful to you and to Ken for bringing us together to talk about all these fabulous things. And everybody has shared, most of what I have to say, but offering opportunities is in any way we can. We as artists have found our joy normally and in our later years, and living our best lives and just letting others see how our passion has informed our lives and carried us through life in many ways is so great. Offering opportunities, starting your own reading club, starting up your own movement class. It's just, we have so much to share, and it's just important to be able to do that, to keep the fire going. Offering opportunities, and once we are in a relationship, listening. Sincere, deep listening, not necessarily to provide a solution, not necessarily to answer those questions that are raised, but to offer support. Just listening makes us, as JC said, feel that we're not alone, that we have support, that we have a companion, we have an ally in our challenging life, and often it is as an artist. So joy came up a lot, listening came up a lot, yeah, I'm very grateful to Ken for having been able to mentor. I have learned so much from those that I have mentored. It is definitely a two-way street. It is definitely an opportunity as an older artist to continue growing and learning while offering support, while sharing the experience that we have gathered throughout our lifetimes. One of the participants mentioned that someone that they had taught reached out to them years and years later with a note of gratitude, and how much that means to us as older artists to have a sense of how we were able to support. It's all we want to do as older artists. Really, some of us are blessed to be able to continue sharing our art form. Performing is something that I still cherish so deeply, but to be able to share what we have and to give back is really what we want to do. So thank you for allowing us to do that, Scott.
Thank you, Claudia. Nicely said. Our final breakout moderator today was Pauline LaBelle.
So we had 6 participants, mostly Ontario, one from the West Coast, one from Manitoba. We had visual artists, directors, actors, producers, musicians, singers, performers, and writers. So quite a diverse group. We spent a lot of time talking about engaging with young artists. And what was really fascinating was some of the personal stories In fact, one participant who she worked with boys and girls clubs. So this wasn't, these kids weren't artists before she got to them, but she started finding out how to help these kids to make art and telling them you are artists. And so I just thought that was a wonderful story, because sometimes you can encourage somebody to be an artist when they never even thought about it. Another was writer in residence, and talked about how in elementary school and how in mentoring these kids. Another participant was fortunate enough to have been mentored as a youth, not all of us. And so for him, it was like, you just carry on. You were mentored as a youth, so you keep on mentoring. And there was also the exchange of, you can also be mentored by younger artists, which was my experience and other people's experience. And we also, Mark Twain said, education is not the filling of the bucket, it's the lighting of a fire. And I love that. And when I was doing it right in residency, it was like, I would send out my little piece and it would say, I light fires. And that's what we do. We light fires. And I think as a mentor as well. So we spent some time talking about political correctness, and the cancel culture and all the rest of that. And everyone wished we'd had more time to talk about that, because that is a big, big issue right now. And one said, it's a dynamic, it's constantly changing, and we are being challenged to see things differently. So that's it.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you for being part of it. Always great to have you with us. I want to thank everybody for making this 9th annual conference one to remember. I encourage you to stay tuned for some of the other things that we have coming up, because this marks the end of our 9th annual conference. Creativity 24 is just about to go into the books. I encourage you to nominate an unsung hero in the arts. The Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award nominations are open. The winner will receive $2,500. And the deadline is November the 15th. We have a couple of things coming up. Our next online salon, we can continue the conversation, is set for November the 12th. And then we're going to have a webinar coming up on seasonal resiliency and how to survive the holidays. We're heading into kind of a gloomy time of year weather-wise, and the holidays can be pretty stressful. So CAN community member Jory Morrow will give us some coping mechanisms for that. That's November the 19th. You can sign up for all of those on our website, which is canartnet.ca. I want to give this moment to thank the board of directors of CAN, led by our chair, Gary Neal. They've been very active and very supportive in all of our programs. Thank you to the Creativity Forever 24 committee, led by Dan Lyon. Thank you to all of our breakout facilitators. You are all marvelous. Thanks to Canadian Webinar Solutions for technical expertise. And as I keep saying, mostly, thank you to you for being here today, because without you, this pretty much would have been pointless. If you missed any of our 3 chapters, they will all be posted on our website in the days to come. We'll be sending out a survey request through SurveyMonkey in the next few days, and ask you to please fill it out, because it helps us report to the New Horizons for Seniors that made this possible. We look forward to seeing you at the next conference next fall for Creativity Forever 25. Much more to come in the meantime, so I hope to see you sooner. And until we do, I wish you happy, healthy, and creative days, because creativity lives forever.